Billy Bones and Blind Pew. My name is Jim Hawkins. When I was a boy, my mother and father had a guest house called the Admiral Benbow, and that is where my story begins. I remember the pirate Billy Bones very well. He came walking up the road from the harbour, a big brown-skinned man in a dirty blue coat. He had long black hair and a scar across his cheek. Behind Billy, another man pulled his sea chest along on a cart. I knew what it was because all sailors and pirates kept their belongings in sea chests. Billy Bones knocked on the door of our guest house with his stick. When my father appeared, Billy said, "I want a room." He threw 4 gold coins on the ground in front of my father. Then he turned to the man with the cart. "Bring in my chest!" cried Billy. I helped the man to carry the great sea chest up to the spare bedroom. It was so heavy that we were both glad to put it down. Billy Bones walked in afterwards and looked around the room. He smiled to himself, and I decided that he must like the room. Billy Bones stayed at the Admiral Benbow for weeks. Every day he climbed up onto the cliff and looked at the sea through a brass telescope. He spent the evenings in the guest house by the fire where he sang his old songs of the sea. He told stories of shipwrecks in terrible storms and men having exciting adventures. If another sailor came to stay at the guest house, Billy peered at him and frowned. One day he said to me, "I'm hiding from a one-legged man. He wants to steal my sea chest, Jim. You must watch out for him and tell me if you see him." My father became ill during that time. Slowly he grew worse until one dark winter's day he finally died. My mother and I missed him terribly. One foggy afternoon, as I stood at the door of the Admiral Benbow thinking of my father, I saw a man slowly walking along the road. His eyes were covered and he wore a great cloak with a hood. He tapped the ground in front of him with a stick. As the man approached the guest house, he heard me moving by the door. He stopped in front of me. "I am Blind Pew," said the man, "a poor blind beggar. I became blind when I was fighting with a pirate. Will you please tell me where I am?" "You are at the Admiral Benbow in Black Hill Cove," I told him. "I hear a young voice. Will you lead me in?" he asked. I held out my hand and Blind Pew pulled me towards him. "Take me to Billy Bones, boy," he hissed, "or I will break your arm." Inside the guest house, Billy looked up and stared at Blind Pew. He looked sick with fear. "Hold out your hand, Billy," ordered Pew. He pressed a piece of paper into Billy's hand and then disappeared. I heard his stick tap-tapping down the road. Billy staggered and put his hand to his throat. "Pew has given me the black spot. He's killed me with his curse," he whispered. And he fell to the floor, dead. I told my mother what had happened. Without my father to look after us, we were both very frightened. There was a dead man in the guest house, and a dangerous man not far away. We ran to the village to get help. We went from house to house and begged each of the men to come back to the guest house with us, but no one dared to do it. "You men have the courage of chickens," my mother cried. "My brave boy Jim and I will go back and face the danger alone. I will open that sea chest and take the money that Billy Bones owes us." We ran back to the guest house. It was foggy, but a full moon glowed red in the sky. We were afraid that someone might see us. My heart beat fast as we stepped through the door and locked it behind us. My mother lit a candle. We went into the room where Billy Bones lay. He was just as we had left him, on his back, with his eyes open and one arm stretched out. We pulled down the blinds so no one could see in. Then my mother said, "We need the key to the chest, Jim. It must be in one of his pockets, but I don't want to touch him." "I'll do it," I offered. I knelt down beside the body. There was a small circle of black paper near Billy's hand, the black spot. I picked it up and looked at it. Then I felt in his pockets. There were a few coins, a knife, a needle and thread, and a compass. Nothing more. "It may be around his neck," said my mother. I tore Billy's shirt open and found the key hanging on a bit of dirty string around his neck. I cut it off with his knife. Then we hurried upstairs with it to Billy's little room. Inside the room we found the sea chest. It was still under the window where the man and I had left it. Billy had not moved it. The chest was old and battered. It had a letter B on the lid. "Give me the key," said my mother. I handed her the key and she put it in the lock. It was stiff, but after some struggling my mother opened it. She lifted the lid and we smelled tobacco and tar. On top there was a new suit, clean and folded. Under the suit we found a tin mug, a pair of guns, a Spanish watch, a few shells, but no money. An old cloak lay at the bottom of the chest. My mother lifted it up impatiently. Inside the pocket she found a small packet tied up with string and a bag of gold coins. "I'm an honest woman," said my mother. "I'll only take the money that he owes us." As she separated the British coins from the foreign ones, I heard a sound that almost made my heart jump into my mouth. Outside the guest house, a stick was tap-tapping on the icy road. It was coming nearer and nearer. It tapped on the guest house door. Then the door handle turned and the lock rattled. We stood by the chest, hardly daring to breathe. At last, there was silence. Then the stick tap-tapped away down the road and was gone. "That was Blind Pew, coming back for the gold coins," I whispered to my mother. "If the door hadn't been locked, he would have found us here. I know he will come back. Let's take the money you have counted and go." My mother jumped to her feet. "I'll take this too," I said. I picked up the little packet and put it in my pocket. We hurried down the stairs and out of the guest house. The moon was shining brightly. Straight away we heard footsteps running towards us. "Under the bridge, quick!" I whispered, pointing to the little bridge outside the guest house. I grabbed my mother's hand and pulled her under the bridge. We hid there in the long grass, trying to get our breath back. From our hiding place, I peered out. 8 men stopped by the guest house door. One man held a lantern to light the way. I could see from the light that the men had black hair and ragged clothes. They looked like pirates. When I heard the high, shaky voice of Blind Pew, I knew I was right. "In, and be quick!" he cried. 5 pirates got ready to break down the guest house door. Then one changed his mind and stopped. He turned the door handle and went in. We'd left the door unlocked in our haste to get away. He was followed quickly by the other 4 pirates who ran inside to find Billy Bones' sea chest. Meanwhile, Blind Pew waited outside with 2 men. A cry of surprise came from inside the guest house. "Ah!" Followed by, "Billy's dead!" They had found Billy's body in the back room. "Search him!" shouted Blind Pew. "The rest of you can look for his sea chest!" Feet pounded up the stairs, and then there was silence. Suddenly Billy's bedroom window was opened. A man leaned out and shouted down to Blind Pew. "Someone's been here already," he explained. "Is it there?" asked Pew. "The money's here, if that's what you mean," the voice answered. "I don't care about the money. What about the packet?" asked Pew. "It's gone, Pew," came the reply. "Those people from the guest house have taken it. They were here a few minutes ago. The door was locked then. Find them. They won't be far away," shouted Blind Pew. We heard the men looking in all the rooms of the Admiral Benbow. They went up and down the stairs so many times I thought they might break. My mother and I huddled together under the bridge. After a few minutes, the pirates came out. "They're not here!" cried one. "We've looked everywhere," said another. Then we heard a whistle. It came from high on the hill behind the village. The pirates looked at each other in fear. "The customs men are after us!" shouted one of the pirates. "Let's run!" "You cowards!" cried Pew. "I'm not leaving without that packet! Oh, I wish I wasn't blind. I was the only one who dared to face Billy Bones, a blind man, and now you won't help me." "We've got the money, Pew, and the people from the guest house might have got the packet. We may never find it," said the pirate. Blind Pew was mad with anger. He raised his stick and beat the men around the back and shoulders. They put their arms up to protect themselves from the blows. Then I heard the sound of horses galloping. It came from the hill. Next came a gunshot. When they heard the sound of gunfire, the pirates turned and ran. They left Blind Pew standing outside the guest house, tapping at the road with his stick. "Don't leave me! Don't leave poor old Pew!" he cried. In the moonlight, 5 men on horseback came galloping down the hill and into the road. Blind Pew screamed and ran. He fell into a ditch, but he jumped up again. He ran straight into one of the horses. My mother fainted. I called out to the customs men. They helped me carry her into the guest house. Most of the furniture was broken, but nothing was missing except for the bag of coins. "The other pirates have escaped, but we have got Pew," said the man in charge. I knew him. His name was Mr. Dance. "What did they want, young Jim? More money?" "I don't think so. I think they wanted something that is now in my pocket. I need to put it somewhere safe and to ask Dr. Livesey for his advice," I replied. "Dr. Livesey? He's a fine gentleman. He will advise you well," said Mr. Dance. He turned to one of his men. "You have a strong horse," he said. "Take young Jim to Dr. Livesey's house, and I'll come too. I want to tell the doctor what happened." When we arrived at Dr. Livesey's house, Mr. Dance told me to jump off the horse and knock on the door. I did as I was told, and a maid came out. She told us that the doctor was visiting his friend Squire Trelawney. We rode on to the hall where Squire Trelawney lived. Another maid took me and Mr. Dance to the Squire's library. Here we found Squire Trelawney and Dr. Livesey sitting by the fire. The doctor was smoking a pipe. He was a small man with a white wig and sharp, bright eyes. Squire Trelawney was tall and red-faced, with thick black eyebrows. "Good evening, Dance," the squire said warmly. "And good evening to you, young Jim. What can we do for you?" Mr. Dance told the 2 men how Blind Pew and the pirates had broken into the Admiral Benbow and searched the place from top to bottom. When he came to the part about the little packet, Dr. Livesey became very interested. "Have you brought it with you, Jim?" he asked. "Here it is, sir," I replied, and held it out to him. Dr. Livesey looked at it and put it on the table. "Now I must go," explained Mr. Dance. "I still have work to do." After Mr. Dance left the room, Squire Trelawney said, "Stay for a while and have some cold pie." I was very hungry, so I had a large piece of pie. Squire Trelawney and Dr. Livesey talked while I ate it. I listened to them with interest. "Trelawney, have you heard of Captain Flint?" asked Dr. Livesey. "I certainly have," cried the squire. "He was the cruelest pirate in the world." "Well, I have heard that Captain Flint robbed some ships. He stole their treasure and buried it," explained Dr. Livesey. "No one knows where, but I have heard that Billy Bones was with Captain Flint when he buried the treasure. He may have helped him, too. I also heard that Blind Pew and his men were looking for something in Billy's room this evening. Now, if Jim will allow us, we will open the packet and see what more it can tell us. Perhaps it will show us where to find this treasure." The doctor looked thoughtfully at the little packet on the table. Yes, open the packet, I agreed. I was very excited. Dr. Livesey took out a pair of scissors. Carefully, he cut open the packet. Inside, he found a book and a map. He opened the book and read a few pages. "What does it say?" asked the squire. "It tells me the names of the ships that Captain Flint robbed and sank," he explained. "It also tells me how much money Captain Flint paid Billy Bones to help him bury the treasure and to look after this map." Dr. Livesey unfolded the map and we all looked at it. It showed a small island that was about 15 kilometres long and 8 kilometres across. There were some notes about how to find the island and where a ship could anchor. In the southwest part of the island, someone had marked a star in red ink. Underneath the star was a note saying, "Treasure buried here." "Let's go to Bristol and hire a ship," cried the squire. "Let's go and find the treasure. We can have a ship ready in 3 weeks. I will be the admiral, Livesey, you will be ship's doctor, and Jim, you will be the cabin boy. All we need is a captain and crew." "I will agree to do it," said Dr. Livesey, "but I'm afraid of one man." "Who?" asked Squire Trelawney. "You, Trelawney," he replied. "You talk too much. This is a secret we have to keep. There are plenty of wicked pirates out there who want that treasure and would be willing to do anything to get it. If any of them find out what we have, they will happily kill us all. We must talk to no one about this. Take 2 of your best men and go to Bristol, Trelawney. Find us a ship and a crew. Jim and I will join you as soon as we can." Before we could set off on our adventure, Dr. Livesey went to London on business. I stayed at the Hall. Redruth, the squire's servant, looked after me. I told no one about the map, but I felt very excited. I often explored the island in my mind. I imagined the men and the wild animals we might have to fight. One day, a letter came for Dr. Livesey. It was from the old Anchor guest house in Bristol. On the front it said, "To be opened by Jim Hawkins if Dr. Livesey is away." This is what I read. Old Anchor, Bristol, 1st of March 1788. Dear Livesey, the ship is ready. She is called the Hispaniola, and the workmen have prepared her well. It was difficult to find a good honest crew. So many Bristol men are pirates. Then, quite by chance, I met a man on the dock called Long John Silver. He knows all the sailors in Bristol. It didn't take him long to find the rest of our crew. Soon we will be hunting treasure. Join me as soon as you can. Tell young Jim to spend a night at the Admiral Benbow to say goodbye to his mother, but Redruth, my servant, must go with him. Yours, John Trelawney. I was pleased with the letter, but I had one worry. What if Long John Silver was the one-legged pirate that Billy Bones was so afraid of? When I arrived at the Admiral Benbow, it felt strange. Since I'd last been there, quite a few things had changed. It did not look like the home I'd left in such a hurry. Squire Trelawney had repaired the broken furniture and had even added some new pieces. He had paid for the guest house to be repainted, too. My mother was well. She was happy to see me and very happy with the repairs the squire had made to our home. She showed me the repaired furniture first and then the new furniture. "What a kind man Squire Trelawney is," she said to me. After dinner the next day, I said goodbye to my mother. Then Redruth and I left my old home and set off for Bristol. One of my last thoughts was of Billy Bones, walking along the cliff top with his brass telescope. We travelled all night. When our carriage arrived at Bristol, we walked through the docks to the guest house where Squire Trelawney was staying. I was delighted with all the tall ships and the sailors who sang as they mended sails or climbed the ropes. Soon I would be off to sea myself, to search for buried treasure. Squire Trelawney met us with a wide smile. "Dr. Livesey arrived last night," he said. "So everyone is here." "When do we sail, sir?" I asked him. "Tomorrow," he replied. In the morning, Squire Trelawney gave me a note addressed to Long John Silver at the Spyglass Guest House.
"You'll find it quite easily," he told me. "Walk through the docks until you see a guest house sign with a telescope painted on it."
Long John Silver was a tall, strong man with a smiling face. Although he only had one leg, he moved easily with the help of a crutch. I stopped worrying. This friendly man could not possibly be a pirate. I walked up to him and gave him the note. "Mrs. Silver, sir?" I asked.
"Yes, my lad. And who are you?" he asked.
He took the note and read it.
"Ah, you are our cabin boy."
He shook my hand. Next, I went to meet Squire Trelawney and Dr. Livesey. They were going to inspect the Hispaniola. We found the Hispaniola in the docks and eagerly climbed on board. A sailor met us and turned to Squire Trelawney.
"The captain wants to speak to you, sir," he said.
"Take us to him,"
the squire replied. Captain Smollett was a cross-looking man who did not appear to be pleased to meet us. He shook our hands quickly with little warmth.
"Are we ready to go to sea?"
asked the squire.
"I don't like the crew,"
the captain replied. At this answer, Dr. Livesey was rather surprised. He looked first at Squire Trelawney, then at me, and finally at the captain. "Captain Smollett, tell us why you don't like the men," he said.
"They think they know more than I do about sailing a ship. They're putting everything in the wrong place. And they talk too much. Even Long John Silver's parrot knows that we're going to hunt for treasure," he replied.
"His parrot?" asked Dr. Livesey.
"He has a large green parrot that sits on his shoulder,"
explained the captain. "I see," said Dr. Livesey. "Now, what do you want to do about it?"
"I want to choose my own crew," replied the captain. "These men talk too much. I've heard them whispering. I'll tell you a secret, shall I? You have a map of an island. There is a red star on it to show you where the treasure lies. And there are instructions telling you how to find the island. All the men know about it."
"But I told no one,"
cried Squire Trelawney. "We must take care," continued Captain Smollett. "No one must see the map. Let's lock our guns and gunpowder safely away from the men."
"Don't you trust them?" asked Dr. Livesey.
"No, I don't," he answered. "If you want me to be your captain, you must take my advice."
"Very well," agreed Dr. Livesey. "No one will see the map, and we will lock up the guns." Captain Smollett left the room and went onto the deck to collect the guns. We followed him. As we were moving the guns and the gunpowder, Long John Silver climbed up the side of the ship.
"What are you doing?" he asked. "We're moving the guns," answered Captain Smollett. "But we'll miss the tide," complained Silver. "That's not your business, Silver. You are only the cook. Now go and make dinner for the men," ordered the captain. Silver disappeared into the galley.